It's amazing to be back in action here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we worked together. It's been even longer since we worked together in this fine city as well. Coming up on, I believe it's now 4 years.
4 years, but the memory and the scars are still there from that final.
You know, something that has changed over the course of the years, but it is a time to dive on into the game as that mouse hold that you were talking about immediately taking the field for Kimo. But, you know, the Amoonguss that we were both kind of touching on for Meaghan will also be in the lead.
Yeah, that Amoonguss is going to have to work around that mouse hold. We know it's got that follow me and the safety goggles, so you know, the Fluttermane can kind of breathe a sigh of relief that it's not necessarily going to be put to sleep. The Dragonite on the opposing side as well has to watch out. Fluttermane being able to go for something like a Dazzling Gleam or a Moonblast here is going to be able to deal some good damage to that opposing Dragonite.
Yeah, this is a really good lead for Kimo, I think. The Fluttermane can, of course, just spread damage around with the Dazzling Gleam. Yes, there is going to be the Assault Vest on that side, but you kind of take this turn to break the multi-scale as well, soften it up a little bit. And the Mouse Hold's going to keep you pretty safe, especially if the Dragonite does fire back. Of course, you've got the Friend Guard in play, which is going to feel really good. So with that knowledge in mind, Meaghan's like, I need to do more damage. Boy, do I have a way to do it.
Yes, and this also removing that Dragon type means those Moonblasts are going to deal even less damage to this opposing Dragonite. It's just going to be a protect on the opposing Amoonguss. I think this is nice so that Amoonguss can figure out how it wants to play this game through for Meaghan, as Mousehold does quite wisely use that Follow Me, draw in what would have been any potential spores, or also deal in any damage from this opposing Dragonite. You want to keep your Fluttermane as healthy as can be. It doesn't have a very high defense stat, so it needs to make sure it's not taking any damage from this opposing Dragonite. You can see the multi-scale's been broken here, and it is able to retaliate with a flying Terra Blast.
And Terra Blast into that Mousehold is going to hurt it a lot. It's not going to be enough for a knockout, but I think a really smart play from Meaghan, as you call it, getting rid of that Dragon typing, being able to deal with, of course, you know, some of those trickier situations, right, where you're facing down a really, really bad type matchup that you couldn't easily get out of. You couldn't attack into the Fluttermane and just knock it out in retaliation. You know, even with the Assault Vest, those are still going to hurt. So being able to get rid of that, a really good use of kind of a defensive and almost offensive Terra typing, because now, you know, you're doubling up on the damage from the same type attack bonus. You're getting more out of that, and you're going to be able to lay down some really big hits.
Mousehold going for the Protect, wants to keep the Friend Guard intact for its partner Fluttermane, and the Aqua Jet coming out there. Actually, nice to see that priority move, and the Mousehold obviously protecting in the face of it, as the Fluttermane is able to go for another Dazzling Gleam, does a little bit of chip to the opposing Amoonguss, chipping away again further at this Dragonite. But the key thing here is while the Mousehold protects itself, it leaves its partner vulnerable to take that sleep.
Really good read from Meaghan there. Going for the Spore in the face of the Follow Me and safety goggles is certainly dangerous. Of course, the Mousehold would have got knocked out if it did just Follow Me and take something like the Aqua Jet, which of course Kimo does know about, right? So it kind of forces the hand. You start predicting a couple turns into each other, and that's how you end up with this turn. But now the Mousehold will be taken down. Nothing you can do about that one with the critical hit. And this Fluttermane's just asleep, so Amoonguss has a little bit of time. Maybe try to help out this Dragonite.
Yeah, you can see Fluttermane has to take that turn of sleep thanks to the Spore on the opposing Amoonguss, and now it's sitting really vulnerable. Amoonguss, however, is like, you know what, I don't need to go on the offensive right now. Let me help that Dragonite regain up its multi-scale, but it's not quite. I think there's a little bit of chip there that the multi-scale isn't going to be reinstated on that opposing Dragonite, but it certainly helps it by giving it some HP as the Dragonite on Kimo's side comes out into the battle too.
Yeah, it manages to come in and get, you know, replace that fallen Mousehold. But honestly, a big thing for Meaghan here is getting rid of the Mousehold. I think getting rid of that Friend Guard is absolutely huge. You want the Fluttermane to slay asleep for another turn probably, so you can just throw a big attack into it and start causing problems that way. And that's a really good opening from Meaghan's side of the field. I think it worked out really, really nicely. Of course, you know, look down at the move choices on these Dragonites. There is going to be maybe some Dragonite versus Dragonite battling here, which certainly gets a little bit tough when you're the one who doesn't have access to the multi-scale anymore. So could be something that Kimo levels up very, very quickly. Of course, you know, the Ice Spinner is going to be really good into the Amoonguss as well. So certainly a lot. Of course, it's not 4 times anymore because of that Terra change, which definitely helps out. But a switch into the Arcanine, yep, Intimidate's going to help out here as well.
Yeah, being able to throw the Intimidate down onto that opposing Dragonite is just going to be able to weaken its attack stat. I mean, Amoonguss, I think, wise to get in and out of there, having a Pokemon like the Dragonite with the Ice Spinner, but also a flying Terra-type Blast is going to be able to have dealt with that Amoonguss, so it's wise switching from Meaghan, and you can see the Terra Flying is going to be activated on the Dragonite. They're matching each other here in Melbourne. Fluttermane going to be still taking a little bit of a rest here, having another turn of sleep, as the Dragonite on Kimo's side is able to go for that flying Terra, and it's going to find its mark onto the opposing Dragonite here.
Yeah, that's getting the extra damage down, keeping it away, of course, from the multi-scale. As the Terra Blast on the other side, yeah, it's going to be going over to the Flutter Mane, so punishing it while it's asleep with an easy knockout right there. His game plan seems to be falling into place from that second turn on Meaghan's side of the field. So being able to, you know, get the Flutter Mane taken out before it really did that much work is absolutely huge, and it forces Kimo down to its final 2 Pokemon here.
Well, this is the issue. You know, Great Tusk can come out and do a lot of good stuff to that opposing Arcanine, something like a Headland Rush or even the Earthquake. At this point, you're not going to be able to hit your partner Pokemon Dragonite. But the issue is, what does Great Tusk really have for the opposing Dragonite? It can't hit it with these ground-type moves. Close Combat, for example, isn't going to be able to do too much necessarily to this Flying-type Pokemon. You're going to really rely on your Dragonite to deal with the opposing one. Yep,
it has to be your Dragonite takes down the opposing Dragonite. And right now, Kimo's is kind of in a top position to do that, right? Does, of course, have access to the multi-scale, still is going to be able to take those hits a little bit better. But don't forget, Meaghan has a full set of 4 Pokemon, right? So, yes, you can spend all your time expending it onto this Dragonite, but there's still a little bit of wiggle room to play around with. It is just going to be, though, the Flare Blitz. So, yeah, it looks like we're making sure that the Dragonite multi-scale is fair and even now.
Yeah, that multi-scale has been broken, but Dragonite able to fire off a Nulla flying Terra Blast here into the opposing Dragonite. Not enough to be able to pick up the KO, though, but another one is sure going to be able to finish it off.
Yeah, and it's just going to be Terra Blast versus Terra Blast as it comes back from this Dragonite. Is going to be a big hit on that side of things. And, of course, that Dragonite's now in a really sticky situation. Does need to try and do a little bit more before it gets knocked out. Of course, could come down to some interesting priority interactions.
That is true. You can really see the benefit of the Intimidate on Meaghan's side, you know, stopping the Terra Blast on the opposing Dragonite from being to deal as much as her own one. I think possibly if it hadn't been Intimidated, that might have been able to get the KO there in that previous turn. Of course, like you said, you know, the priority here might be able to deal with the opposing Dragonite because Kimo's one does seem to be faster.
And Kimo's is pretty consistently going first, so you got to think about that as you play through the game. But Meaghan has this wiggle room, right? Is able to get the Amoonguss in, and that's going to take the extreme speed much nicer. Of course, that just leaves Arcanine on its own. It's going to land it, and it's the Dragonite dealt with. So everything on this Great Tusk, which at some point has to try and fight a flying type Terra Dragonite in the back.
Exactly, and I think that was really great playing there by Meaghan, bringing in, you know, bringing out, I want to say, the Dragonite that we know that this Great Tusk cannot really deal with too well. I think was a really nice play. Yes, it can absolutely destroy this Arcanine from the field. It's going to have to take those drops as well due to Headland Rush, dropping the defense and the special defense. However, Meaghan just has the utility in the back to be able to deal with it. We haven't even seen her 4th Pokemon.
And maybe she's not going to show it to us. Absolutely no reason to show that one away. Great Tusk, of course, is going to be struggling here. Can't even be defensive, right? Can't even go protect because it's just going to be Pollen Puff over and over again.
Exactly.
So has to try, I guess, and hit the Dragonite, but what are you going to hit it with? You know, we can see from Kimo's side, obviously, the options. They're not looking great when it comes to hitting flying-type Pokemon. I'd say they're actually suboptimal would be the term I'd use.
Definitely, yeah. Suboptimal, I think, is the key word of the moment here, Adam.
Yeah. So this Great Tusk will, of course, get knocked out. You know, the big thing is, do you want to try and force to see that 4th Pokemon, get a little extra information coming through? But even that's going to be a big ask, you know. And you know, every time you Headlong Rush, you know, you're just lowering your stats to make things a little bit easier. So yeah, Amoonguss just keeps the Dragonite safe just in case. But yeah, takes a Headlong Rush like a champ, and I think we know what's coming next.
Yeah, that's the thing. Dragonite's going to be able to start cleaning this up a little bit more into this opposing Great Tusk. I mean, this is the thing as well. You can go for, even if you went for the close combat, the Rage Powder on that Amoonguss is just going to draw it in anyway. There's no way to deal with this Dragonite at this point in time. It is going to be able to go for this Terra Blast and connect down onto the opposing Great Tusk, break the Focus Sash on it, taking it down to that 1 HP remaining. But we've already seen on Meaghan's side as well that it has that priority with, you know, Extreme Speed or Aqua Jet. It's just going to be able to clean up Great Tusk here.
Oh yeah, can do multiple ways around it, and there's no way the Great Tusk can fight back. I mean, the only way it can hit both would be with Earthquake, which, well, it doesn't hit both. It doesn't hit the Dragonite, so absolutely no way out. And Kimo probably taking this time to reflect a little bit on what went wrong in Game 1 and where there's potential to bounce back. So see Kimo turning in the forfeit. Had a very interesting team. I really liked the lead, but then I think Meaghan just read it turn after turn. Its first 2-3 turns were just such a good opening. You know, playing around the protect turn, right? You know, catching that mouse hole, protecting, and then just sporing the Flutter Mane. Absolutely huge.
I mean, I have to say as well, you know, the key thing I've got to credit from Meaghan's side is that Dragonite, because when you look at Kimo's Flutter Mane, it should be in a great position to deal with that opposing Dragonite. It's running those choice specs. It can go for a Moonblast, even Dazzling Gleam just to do chip to the partner Pokemon as well. That should be dealing very heavily with a Dragon-type Pokemon. But that's where Meaghan has so much flexibility. You know, you drop that Dragon typing, let's just go flying with Terra-type, but then also the Assault Vest, the Multiscale. These are special attacks coming out from Flutter Mane, and Flutter Mane may have a 135 base special attack stat. That's not going to be enough to be able to deal with the Dragonite here.
No, not if the Dragonite's set up with the Assault Vest and the Multiscale in play and able to keep the Dragonite safe. So the real focus for me is how do you deal with the Dragonite? And I think, honestly, you know, Kimo had 3 ways essentially on that team to deal with it. You know, the Flutter Mane can do a lot of damage to it. The Dragonite can also do plenty of damage back. The Dragonite did get slowed down significantly, though, by the Arcanine. And then you got to start looking at Iron Bundle, right? When is that going to come through and really start to put that pressure down? So that's where I think Kimo has to lean into it. But if he leans all the way in, let's say he brings all 3 of those Pokemon and Mouse Hold, right? Just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
You're certainly kind of sharing some issues across that team, and you're relying a lot on the Mouse Hold again.
I'm not going to lie, I'm surprised Iron Bundle didn't come to that game. I would drop the Mouse Hold. Yes, it was very useful in the face of that Amoonguss, but in the end of the day, it didn't really work out. You know, Meaghan was able to deal with the Mouse Hold very quickly. You then don't have that support. You don't have the Friend Guard support either. I would actually drop it and bring that Iron Bundle in. You can apply a lot of pressure, something like an Icy Wind or a Freeze Dry to Dragonite, even if it wants to Terra. You're a Flying type. I can still do damage with my Ice type moves. And then on the flip side, again, Pokemon like the Arcanine, you can deal with that with Hydro Pump. The Amoonguss, again, the Ice type moves are going to be able to deal with it. I think to me it's a no-brainer to adapt that in, but hey, I'm this side of the desk.
I do think it's a key pick, right? Of the 3 that we saw last game from Meaghan, it applies pressure to all 3 in some ways, so it does seem to make a lot of sense. As Kimo is going to be back in Team Preview, making those selections and making potentially those changes as well. So tough calls to make. You know, bouncing back from a Game 1 loss is always kind of tough, so definitely has to dig deep on the team. And you know, if you're Meaghan, do you try and read into that? Do you try and, you know, twist things up a little bit and get ahead of the game? I think the Iron Hands, I mean, obviously we didn't see the 4th one, so it could have been Iron Hands.
Could have been.
But, you know, that feels like it would be in a pretty safe spot to be able to cause some problems. Of course, yes, has to be cautious of the, you know, the Flutter Mane, but then it has the access to Terra and can get around it that way. So certainly a lot of game to play still. Certainly a lot more of these teams to dive into because they are both quite offensive. I mean, there wasn't too much support play going on in that game, and I think, you know, it's got to be time for Iron Bundle for me, just sneaking into the shot there, just saying, pick me, pick me.
Yeah, pick me, choose me, put me in, please. I think it's a really valid call to make that adjustment if you're Kimo. I think from Meaghan's side, I really like the 3 that she brought. Obviously, we don't know what the 4th one is, but for me, the eyes on that Flutter Mane, we know it's nice and speedy as well, and if it's running that Focus Sash, then it's going to be able to take an attack, and you can bring it in as that kind of endgame cleaner-upper and just deal with whatever Pokemon are left to, you know, to KO.
It appears that Meaghan's also moved to the notepad and paper option, so that may be an interesting bit of tracking to take into Game 2.
It leaves the team sheet completely clear to view, right?
That's true.
All the information. And speaking of information, let's take a look at the leads. It looks very similar to that Game 1. We have got the Mouse Hold and the Flutter Mane coming out for Kimo on the opposing side, and Amoonguss and Dragonite once again for Meaghan.
Yeah, I think the big thing here is how do you mix it up and play it differently? I've already seen a change coming out from Kimo's side as he locks in those moves very quickly, so bringing that strategy to the fore just makes a whole lot of sense. The Flying type coming through once again, so being able to avoid getting caught by something like the Moonblast or, of course, the spread Dazzling Gleam, as the Rage Powder is going to start causing a whole lot of problems here, I think, for Kimo.
Yes, of course, Mouse Hold with that Super Fang is going to ignore it because it's running those safety goggles and it's going to be able to connect damage onto that opposing Dragonite. However, the Flutter Mane is going to have to fall victim to that Rage Powder, will draw in the attacks on Amoonguss, taking that Shadow Ball. It's going to be able to eat its berry for its troubles, regain a little bit of HP, but I think critically those safety goggles really working out for the Mouse Hold here. Dragonite, of course, still to move, can go for another Terror Blast. It's going to find its mark down onto that opposing Flutter Mane and will deal a significant chunk of damage.
Yeah, but that's the Friend Guard coming to the fore though. As you saw, Flutter Mane got knocked out by it last game, now being able to stick around. So a much better turn for Kimo, I think there. Of course, not the turn I think he was looking for. Obviously wanted to land combination Super Fang and Shadow Ball all in one. That would have been a really big play there. And if you doubled up on the Moonguss, I think that would have been a much better turn. But at least you're still in the game. At least your Flutter Mane's looking a lot better now. You got that Super Fang down onto the Dragonite, which was a huge problem for you in game number 1. So being able to push that a little bit harder and make it answer more questions early doors just feels a lot better. As yeah, this Amoonguss' whole goal right now is to try and keep things safe. Mainly, you know, keep this Flutter Mane off the Dragonite, as the Super Fang, yeah, is going over that side this time. And of course, the Shadow Ball will follow up, and it's going to be a KO.
Yeah, straight down to the Amoonguss. Like you said there, Adam, might have been better as that turn one. Just deal with this pesky mushroom, get it off the field. Can't go for that redirection, can't go for any spores. It, of course, does allow the Dragonite to still go for another Terra Blast here, but the nice thing, I suppose, is that Mousehold's able to take it, hanging on. You still have this Flutter Mane Mousehold combination here. That Friend Guard still activated, and Mousehold can now go for that Follow Me in the next turn and try and protect Flutter Mane a little bit more. But speaking of Flutter Mane, there's another one on the field. Meaghan brings her own one out.
Yeah, and this is actually a really good time for the Flutter Mane to come out, because the Flutter Mane, I was thinking about it, you've got these two Pokemon kind of low, kind of want to be able to, you know, maybe catch them off guard, tidy up the game, and swing it back in your advantage. Flutter Mane's one of the best for that, right? Being able to, of course, you know, come in, use some of those spread moves, which are always so essential. You know, if you need a little bit of extra damage and you want to skip out on some of the priority, Dragonite has that option. Dragonite has the ability, as we've seen with Meaghan's, to be able to not just use Extreme Speed, but also the Aqua Jet as well. You know, you've got to have 4 attacks when you're playing with the Assault Vest, so it makes a lot of sense. And this Follow Me from Mousehold, you know, could cause some problems here. You know, taking away something like the Aqua Jet, but it does mean now, Friend Guard, gone.
It's gone. I love the addition of Aqua Jet with so many ghosts running around and ghost Terra types. For example, on that Mousehold, it allows you to still be able to connect. The Moonblast is going to come out as well from Meaghan. It's going to be faster, and we'll pick up the KO against the Flutter Mane on Kimo side. A double knockout here for Meaghan. Yeah,
Meaghan definitely swinging things back in their favor really quickly there. I love to see how, you know, you can kind of plan a couple steps ahead once again. Kimo got off to a much better start. It really felt good, but the Iron Bundle that we were talking about is definitely, you know, into play. You've got Iron Bundle, you've got Great Tusk, and now you've got 2 of these huge offensive threats on the board. And you've got Meaghan kind of, you know, a little bit, you know, on the back foot without the Amoonguss.
Definitely, and this is where, you know, the Iron Bundle can come into its moment. It can go for something like the Icy Wind here, deal a huge chunk of damage to that opposing Dragonite, and of course chip the Focus Sash on that opposing Flutter Mane as well. It will lower its speed. That will also enable the Great Tusk to be able to come in and try and pick up a KO against it. Something like on that Great Tusk, you know, you could go for that Headlong Rush again and try and just deal damage and try and get a double KO in retaliation for the 2 that you were just, you know, falling victim to against Meaghan.
Yeah, that's now a big change from Kimo that's going to be important. I think Iron Bundle here could start cleaning up to really solve some of those problems. So yeah, Iron Bundle with Icy Wind. Yeah, this is about to take a turn, I think.
Yeah, not enough to pick up the KO against that opposing Dragonite, though. It does spite a cheeky critical hit on here, but the key thing with that Icy Wind is getting the speed drop on both of these opposing Pokemon as the move has connected. Great Tusk now enabled to go for that Headlong Rush and deal with that Flutter Mane. It's out of here before we're able to see it do any damage to these 2 Paradox Pokemon on Kimo's side of the field.
Yeah, but the Headlong Rush does mean, of course, that the defenses are going to be lowered, so it is going to be able to potentially take advantage of that as the Terra Blast does come through for the Dragonite. We'll see how much it does to the Iron Bundle. Not enough. We'll, of course, have to start playing with priority to try and deal with that one. But, you know, now we get to see what Meaghan's 4th Pokemon is. Could be a really big difference maker. Yeah, the Arcanine's going to help here. But, you know, I think the Great Tusk's in a much better position. Of course, now there really is a very delicate situation to go with, right? Because, of course, the Iron Bundle's the fastest thing. It could slow this Dragonite down and pick it off. Dragonite has to go for one of those priority moves as well. And now we're kind of stepping through a little bit. You know, can you make sure the Iron Bundle's dealt with and then leave the Great Tusk struggling against this Dragonite?
But of course, the Iron Bundle can always go for a Protect as well and just kind of burn off one of those priority moves coming out from the opposing Dragonite, leaving it more vulnerable for the Great Tusk to support it. But Great Tusk is going to go for that Ground Terror type, so all of these Ground type moves are going to deal even more damage into something like that opposing Arcanine. This is wise. You've taken an Intimidate. Your attack stat has been dropped, so you need to get the extra boost back up from that Terror typing. It is going to be the Protect on the Iron Bundle, so it's not going to fall victim to any of these priorities. But the Aqua Jet's actually going down into the Great Tusk, breaking the Focus Sash.
Yeah, I think this is a very wise turn indeed from Meaghan, knowing that it is going to be there. That Flare Blitz isn't enough onto the Great Tusk, though. Of course, there is going to be a very quick retaliation as close combat goes into Dragonite. That's exactly what Kimo needed. Now has 2v1. Could wrap this one up very quickly. Depends, though, on what can this Arcanine do. Can it take a potential Headlong Rush?
I don't think it can, particularly not as we've got that Terror.
Or could it knock it out? That's the big thing.
That's true.
I mean, it's also going to get hit by the Iron Bundle. So, yeah, this Arcanine has got way too much to do, but Kimo dancing with it. Yeah, the Hydro Pump connects.
I think we're about to go into, Hydro Pump could miss, and then, that's a different situation. But no, the Iron Bundle is really kind of, reducing the reputation that Hydro Pump has. We've seen her have, I think, 100% accuracy record. Probably not now that I've spoken that into existence. But an amazing adjustment by Kimo here. It definitely looked difficult at the beginning, but I think bringing in those Paradox Pokemon, and we said adapt and bring in that Iron Bundle, and it was the perfect support that the Great Tusk needed.
The end game was so nicely played by Kimo there. I really have to give props on that one. Just being able to bring that Iron Bundle in, that Protect was really problematic, and the focus actually early game on that Dragonite, really paid off over the course of the game, right? So that Dragonite just wasn't in as solid a position throughout the course of the game because of that early Super Fang, actually. I think the Maushold just Super Fanging right off the bat, being able to say, actually, at some point you're going to get knocked out. Didn't get knocked out as soon as it maybe could have, but was still in a great position going through the game to, be able to be pressured a lot more. So that was a really nice adjustment, and that's that safety goggles coming through, right? I mean, Meaghan spent a lot of time using that Amoonguss early on to distract and keep the Dragonite safe. It actually went down turn 2, which is a real big loss for the Amoonguss, which in game 1 did so much. It was able to Pollen Puff, it was able to Spore, it was able to cause just problems in mind games. So certainly a tough situation and a great adaptation by Kimo Nishimura. So game on in my book for game number 3. I think both of them are going to be able to put forward a really good idea, a really good bit of kind of team strategy and team planning, and that really leaves us for a fantastic set on our hands here.
I mean, I know I was kind of saying, bench the Maushold, bring in the Iron Bundle, but Kimo proved me wrong. And I think the one nice thing, like you've said, that Maushold was able to, at the beginning of that game, just cause enough disruption, getting the big damage onto the opposing Dragonite, and also just leaving the Amoonguss null and void. With those safety goggles, it's not going to have to worry about Rage Powders and Spores, and that just enabled it to be able to target down to whoever Kimo wanted to target, and that was really, really nicely played. The one thing I have to credit, though, as well with Meaghan at the end, Meaghan didn't fall for the priority into the Iron Bundle. It still didn't work. However, that just, again, shows to Kimo's credit how well he positioned that endgame situation, because even though Meaghan did go for the Aqua Jet into the opposing Great Tusk, it still wasn't enough with the combination to be able to get the KO.
And this goes all the way back to turn 1. If you don't land that Super Fang on Dragonite, it's not then later in range to get knocked out by a not very effective close combat. So it really is something you put in early in the game. If it pays off and it comes back around for you, you're going to be in a great position later on. So definitely good game planning and adaptation from Kimo. I think Meaghan still bought the correct 4. It was nice to see the 4th Pokemon this time, obviously, and understand exactly what it was. It was that Flutter Mane, something quite offensive. Did play that kind of middle turn really well, right? Like clean up those other 2 and get the momentum. But then as soon as Kimo reveals what the next 2 are, the momentum very quickly comes back. He's got these 2 full health Paradox Pokemon. The Paradox Pokemon have been defining, I think it's fair to say, in the meta game. Fair play, both of them running at least 2. It's actually 3 for Kimo. I've been having this kind of conversation with a number of players, right? It's like, how many Paradox is too many? And they're like, to be honest, 3's fine. 2 might not be enough, and 1, you're just leaving money on the table, right? You're leaving great options up there. So, both trainers showing off. Of course, Meaghan really relying on the Flutter Mane more than the Iron Hands here. But that last game, Kimo used all 3 to great success with the support Maushold. Definitely something I like the look of.
Me too, and you've got to, acknowledge sometimes you might lose 2 Pokemon, but that gives you a free switch to 2 in the back. And speaking of Pokemon that have been in the back, the King Gambit's been benched. It's now out for game 3. Head up with that Flutter Mane for Kimo, and it's still Dragonite and Amoonguss, however, for Meaghan. That's
definitely a mix-up with the King Gambit coming right in, being able to cause some problems. A Pokemon that, I don't know if everyone's kind of got the hang of yet. It's something I've seen played, really kind of interesting different ways to go around it. But right off the bat, it's a really offensive lead from Kimo. These are 2 Pokemon that love to deal damage, love to cause problems, and, now there's no Maushold mind games to play. How much can the Amoonguss do, or is the Amoonguss just going to get taken out very, very quickly as yet? An early Terra type makes a lot of sense here for me. Both trainers, want to start putting that pressure down. And once again, say it game 1, we'll say it game 2. Get rid of your Dragon typing.
Yes, exactly. Drop that and then just go on this flying typing. Amoonguss going to go for a Protect. No Terrestrialization coming out on Kimo's side of the field, however. Amoonguss obviously playing defensively here as Flutter Mane can follow the Shadow Ball into the Dragonite here. Going to be able to deal a little bit of damage. The key thing here is breaking that multi-scale. Of course, Dragonite can retaliate with a Terra Blast of its own here, and it's going to target down into the Flutter Mane. Try and deal with it. There's no Friend Guard to help it out anymore. It gets a 1-hit KO.
Yep, that's an easy trade, but the nod from Kimo implies he may be okay with that protect. Here is the follow-up from Assurance.
Ooh.
It's not enough damage, but it's still, once again, popped that Dragonite so low and so close to getting knocked out by pretty much anything on the field. Really smart, though, didn't fall for the Amoonguss's protect. Actually, the Amoonguss could have got away with something there, so definitely getting a little bit of kind of free time there, and Meaghan taking the foot off with the Amoonguss makes a lot of sense. I think there is going to be a hard pivot over to deal with it, as this is once again probably Dragonite's last ride here, as it's facing down it's facing down an Iron Bundle, and that's where I get concerned, especially when the Iron Bundle does this.
Yeah, when it wants to go into its Terra Ice form, it's going to be able to deal even more damage, gets an extra 50% boost on those Ice-type moves, so going for something like an Icy Wind. If it is able to connect, however, it avoids on that opposing Amoonguss, but it looks like it's going to be able to get the nice clean KO against this opposing Dragonite. Already would have dealt a significant chunk, but with the extra boost, can remove it from the field. It would have been nice to get that damage on the opposing Amoonguss. It is still a threat and can obviously retaliate with something like a Spore here, try and put some Pokemon to sleep. We haven't got the Mouse Holder on the field. Kingambit can go for the Assurance here, just doing about a quarter of damage there, and the Spore finds its mark on that Kingambit. Yeah,
of course, the Assurance not getting the bit of damage before that it needs to do even more damage. That is actually a very painful miss that could have dealt with it. I mean, I do think Terra Ice would be doing preposterous amounts of damage onto the Amoonguss, and this is where Iron Bundle can shine. But the Kingambit, something that of course threatens the Fluttermane, was the target of being put to sleep. That is a really big play, making sure that the Kingambit, could just get caught really early on while it's still asleep. The Iron Bundle's forced to protect, so now you've got a couple of turns to start causing problems with this Fluttermane. It's all about offense in these next couple of turns, I think, but Meaghan only has one Pokemon doing it, so she's really relying on this Fluttermane to take advantage of these Kingambit sleep turns.
Yes, the Iron Bundle's the key Pokemon here for Kimo. You want to make sure it's preserved. Amoonguss just going to go for the Pollen Puff here into the Fluttermane. Obviously not going to do anything because it's that full HP. But I think, like you said, Amoonguss isn't on the offensive here. The only thing it can do is offer that support. And you just want to make sure that the Fluttermane is going to be able to stay healthy. It's running that Focus Sash. So Meaghan had the kind of confidence that you could take one hit from it. Amoonguss now as well, just going to go for the Protect. Doesn't want to have to take any of these Ice-type moves coming out from the Iron Bundle. It's going for the Icy Wind again, finds the Protect on that Amoonguss, but is going to be able to connect down onto that Fluttermane, breaking that Focus Sash and lowering the speed by one stage.
Yeah, back in my day, Icy Wind was like chip damage. It did like a maybe 10% if you were lucky. That is not chip damage. That is a whole amount. As Iron Bundle holds on through the Moonblast, but Kingambit still fast asleep. So, of course, this Fluttermane is taking the speed drops, is causing problems. But now, actually, you can maybe start to spread the damage a little bit. You don't need that huge hit on Iron Bundle. And you kind of want to see what Kimo has last. That's really big, but Kimo's been getting away with this. This Kingambit's in a great position, hasn't taken any damage while it's been asleep. So at some point, it's going to wake up and it's going to hit an Assurance after an Icy Wind. It's
been left relatively unchecked at this point. Meaghan's really targeting down the Iron Bundle, and now Kimo's got an interesting situation because I think it's on a bit of a ticker. What do you go for, a Protect or an offensive movement? It's going to be the Freeze Dry into that opposing Amoonguss, trying to get the KO, and it does. So no longer has to deal with that pesky Amoonguss, putting Pokemon to sleep. Yes, Iron Bundle might go down for its troubles here in the opposing Fluttermane, is going to go for that Moonblast and pick up the KO against it, but this Kingambit is still here. It's going to wake up any turn soon and be able to deal huge damage to this opposing Fluttermane. Yeah,
something that I think is very interesting about Meaghan's Fluttermane is it doesn't have access to the spread move. It is just locked into the Moonblast, so Fluttermane getting caught didn't punish the Kingambit while it was asleep for so long, and that might come back to haunt Meaghan at the end of this game. We see two offensive threats. You've got to wonder, what does Meaghan have in the back that could potentially take both of these down? It's Arcanine, and the problem is while it may be able to beat Kingambit, it does not slow down the Great Tusk enough. The Great Tusk won't have access to the Ground Terror. Of course, we saw that go over to the Iron Bundle. But Kingambit now got a Defiant boost, and it just woke up.
That's the thing. Kingambit's in a great position to just go for a cheeky Sucker Punch, deal some damage to this opposing Arcanine, and then allow Great Tusk to really clean up the rest here and take this game for Kimo. I mean, Arcanine's been the Pokemon that Meaghan has, really championed. It's the mascot on the field as well, but just was not the Pokemon in the back, meaning Kimo is going to take this round one game 2-1.
Yeah, Kimo bouncing back from the 0-1 at the beginning of the set, and then taking the next two, so really making things work, and really nice adaptations actually over the course of the set.